If you love to lift heavy and roll hard, this one training method can be a game changer in helping you supercharge your athleticism both in the gym and on the mat. It's called the dynamic effort method. I've been using this one training method for the last 9 years, and it's drastically improved my ability to be more explosive in all of my takedowns, faster in all of my guard passes, and quicker in every single scramble that I get into. In this video, you will learn what the dynamic effort method is and what it's not, the 8 benefits that using the dynamic effort method could provide for your own athleticism. I'm gonna show you how to implement the dynamic effort method into your training and tell you about some common mistakes to avoid. If you don't know who I am, my name is Josh Selledge. I'm a strength and conditioning coach, and I've spent over a decade training both in the gym and on the mat, as well as seeking out the best training methods and tactics to help grappling athletes feel and perform their best both in the gym and on the mat so they can lift heavy and roll hard. The dynamic effort method is a form of strength training that focuses on using submaximal loads or submaximal weights and moving them as fast and as explosively as possible. And if you've watched my earlier video on the max effort method, you might remember that the term strength we define as your ability to produce force. Now, the force equation has 2 parts to it. Force equals mass times acceleration. The max effort method definitely leans way more on the side of improving how much mass you could lift and being able to produce force, while the dynamic effort method focuses more on the acceleration side of that equation. So say we had 2 athletes, and each athlete had a dumbbell in front of them. One athlete had a 50-pound dumbbell, the other athlete had a 100-pound dumbbell. They're 2 different athletes. The athlete that lifts the 100-pound dumbbell produced more force than the athlete that lifted the 50-pound dumbbell, because one dumbbell is 50 pounds heavier than the other. Now, if we have those same 2 athletes and they each stepped up to a 50-pound dumbbell, it weighs exactly the same, but one athlete lifts the 50-pound dumbbell really slow and the other athlete lifts the 50-pound dumbbell really fast, the athlete who lifted the same weight faster ended up producing more force. If the max effort method tends to focus more on bringing up the mass side of the force equation, the dynamic effort method is kind of like its twin brother that focuses more on bringing up the acceleration side of the force equation. And you can almost think of dynamic effort method training as your speed work or as your explosive power training. So what does dynamic effort training actually look like in the gym? And well, that's where things start to get really, really messy, because you have powerlifting styles of dynamic effort method training where you're using squats, bench press, deadlift, putting a bunch of bands and chains on there. You also have dynamic effort method training that could take the form of doing all body weight exercise, different types of jumps and plyometric movements. You also have dynamic effort method training that incorporates a lot of different kettlebells or maybe throwing med balls and sandbags. There are so many different ways that you could use the dynamic effort method into your training, especially when it comes to improving your athleticism on the mat. And that's part of what we're going to go over today. Even though there are a bunch of different ways you could use the dynamic effort method into your training, there is one key thing that is present through any type of dynamic effort exercise, throughout any type of dynamic effort workout. And that's called compensatory acceleration. Compensatory acceleration is basically just you trying to send it as hard as freaking possible through the entire range of motion of a given exercise. So you know how sometimes when you're doing bench press, it may feel really tough at the bottom where you're weakest, but then as you get closer to lockout, you can kind of take your foot off the gas a little bit because you're much stronger here. Compensatory acceleration just kind of throws that out the window. You're trying to be as violent and as aggressive and as explosive as possible all the way through the entire range of motion. And that compensatory acceleration, or at least aggressively trying to apply compensatory acceleration through the entire range of motion of a given exercise, is a key component of the dynamic effort method. A simple way to understand compensatory acceleration could be when you're just doing a regular jump off the ground. If you were trying to jump up as high as you possibly could, you would need to push your feet through the ground as hard as you can, all the way through the entire range of motion until you actually left the ground. So you would be pushing aggressively with your toes, and recruiting and flexing all the muscles of your legs, swinging your arms. You'd be doing as much as you possibly could to aggressively apply force into the ground to push and propel yourself upwards in the air. Now, if you just needed to jump 1 inch off the ground, you wouldn't need to be that aggressive. You could just engage a little bit of muscles and real quick and get a little bit of airtime, but you're not going to jump that high. Compensatory acceleration is really being intentional and focusing on pushing as hard as you freaking can to be as violent and aggressive and as explosive as possible in that movement. When using the dynamic effort method in your workouts, the goal should be to try for every rep of every set to be as fast and as explosive as possible. And because that's the goal, most dynamic effort method workouts and exercises tend to be much higher sets, but much lower reps. It's very hard for an athlete to be maximally explosive and move at maximum speed past about 5 reps. So most dynamic effort sets tend to be between 1 to 5 reps. The total number of sets that you do per dynamic effort workout depends on a variety of different factors. If you're in really, really bad shape, you may not be able to handle more than maybe 4 to 6 sets of dynamic effort work per workout. But if you're in really good shape, your conditioning's on point, you've already spent some time working with the dynamic effort method, you may actually be able to handle maybe 2 to 3 different dynamic effort exercises where you're doing anywhere from 8 to 12 sets of 1 to 5 reps on all of those exercises because you've built up the capacity to maintain that explosiveness and power throughout the entire workout. It's really important to remember that if you notice that you start to lose some of that maximum speed and explosive power on the last couple reps of your sets, you probably should just cut some reps short and do less reps per set. So if you're doing sets of 5 on explosive bench press and the first 3 reps are super, super aggressive, super fast, but then reps 4 and reps 5 start to slow down, you should probably just skip reps 4 and reps 5. Just do 3 reps and make sure that every rep of that set is super explosive. The other thing is that if you're experiencing that all of your reps in a given set are moving too slow, you probably need to lower the weight to a sub-maximal weight that you can use and still be fast and aggressively explosive on every rep of every set. A good way to gauge to know if you're being fast enough for a lot of these movements is to think of, for upper body movements, it should look like you're throwing a punch. It should be super fast, super aggressive, almost be violent. Now for lower body dynamic effort exercises, they should look like you're about to jump. If you're doing dynamic effort squats, they should be moving so fast that it looks like you're going to do a jump. And even jumping is a great dynamic effort exercise that you can use. And so you want to make sure that every set and every rep is fast, explosive, powerful, violent, aggressive. That is the key to get the most out of your dynamic effort training. We will definitely go over how to structure a dynamic effort method workout for a grappling athlete. But before we do, let's go over some things that the dynamic effort method is not and a lot of misconceptions around this style of training. The dynamic effort method is not just for powerlifting. Even though the dynamic effort method definitely became much more popular in the United States through powerlifting circles with guys like Louis Simmons and everyone over there at Westside Barbell, that doesn't mean that it's only for powerlifting. And ironically enough, the dynamic effort method was originally used by the strength coaches of the Soviet Union for a lot of their track and field athletes, Olympic weightlifters, and even some of their wrestlers. So even though the dynamic effort method may look like squat, bench, deadlift with a bunch of bands and chains, that's not the only way you could use this style of training. The dynamic effort method is also not being sloppy and being a spaz in the gym. You can almost think of this like jiu-jitsu. If you're being a spaz at jiu-jitsu and you have no form and no technique, you might be able to get away with that for a little while, but you're really not getting the most benefit out of the training that you're doing on the mat. Same thing with the dynamic effort method. If your reps look fast, but they're super sloppy, they're all over the place, your form and technique is breaking down like crazy, you may be able to get a little bit of benefit from that early on, but it's really not the best way to go about it if you want to have true long-term progression in becoming extremely explosive and extremely powerful. Remember, every rep of every set should be as fast and as explosive as possible while still maintaining proper form and technique. The dynamic effort method is not just about using bands and chains. Even though using resistance bands on squats or adding chains to deadlifts can be really fun, that's not the only way you have to do dynamic effort training. I get questions all the time where people ask, hey, Coach Jay, can I still use the dynamic effort method if I don't have bands and chains? And the answer is absolutely. Bands and chains are a very small part of the dynamic effort method, and there are a ton of different exercises that don't require bands and chains that you could use in a dynamic effort workout. And lastly, the dynamic effort method is not any more dangerous than any other form of strength training. The idea that lifting slowly is less dangerous than lifting explosively is just silly. As long as you're using appropriate load for the given exercise and you're maintaining proper form and technique, the dynamic effort method is not any more dangerous than any other form of strength training. And as a matter of fact, the dynamic effort method is actually one of the best ways to further help decrease your risk of injury, not just in the gym, but also on the mat. Even though jiu-jitsu is not the most explosive sport in the world, you should definitely consider using the dynamic effort method to help you build explosiveness and build explosive power, so that way you can be fast and be explosive when you need to. There are 8 main benefits to using the dynamic effort method. The first one being improving your rate of force development. Your rate of force development is essentially your ability to go from 0 to 100 and being able to produce the most amount of force possible. The greater your rate of force development, the faster you'll be able to fire off takedowns, blast through people's guards, and scramble to a dominant position. If you want to be fast, you have to train fast. And that's why the dynamic effort method is fantastic for improving your rate of force development and improving your ability to go from 0 to 100 in your explosive power. Number 2, increased activation of type 2 muscle fibers. When using the dynamic effort method, you're using submaximal loads or submaximal weights and moving them as fast and as explosively as you can. These types of explosive movements are great for engaging type 2 muscle fibers, which are largely responsible for most explosive and athletic movements on the mat. If you're doing some sort of jump, some sort of throw, sprinting, a takedown, blasting through someone's guard, you're recruiting a lot of type 2 muscle fibers, and the dynamic effort method is great for further helping improve your ability to activate those type 2 muscle fibers. Number 3, enhanced neuromuscular efficiency. Part of being able to move quickly and explosively on the mat depends on the communication between your nervous system and your muscles. And the dynamic effort method can help improve the communication between your brain and nervous system, recruiting those big, powerful muscle fibers and a lot of those explosive movements that you do on the mat. Number 4, improving your stretch shortening cycle. Your muscles are elastic and they kind of act like a rubber band. When a muscle is stretched, there's an elastic component to it that once it's stretched, it wants to snap back to its original position. If you've ever done a heavy back squat or a bench press, you might have found that sometimes when you bring the bar down, you get a little bit of a bounce off your chest. Or when you do a heavy back squat, you can bounce out of the hole. What you're engaging when you do that bounce is the stretch reflex, or taking advantage of the stretch shortening cycle, where you quickly apply a stretch to the muscle and kind of use that elastic component to give you a little extra boost as you're pressing the bar off your chest or as you're standing up out of the hole. The dynamic effort method is great for improving your muscle's ability to go through that stretch shortening cycle, get stretched, and then snap back really aggressively and with a lot of force. Number 5, more responsive muscle spindle sensitivity. Your body has these little sensors called muscle spindles, which pick up on changes in muscle length and different contractions happening within the muscle. The greater your muscle spindle sensitivity, the better they are at being able to sense changes within the muscle and further enhance that stretch shortening cycle that we just talked about. Number 6, increased motor unit recruitment. Just like the max effort method, the dynamic effort method can be fantastic for improving your body's ability to recruit those big and powerful muscle fibers. There's this thing called the size principle, which basically means that when you do an exercise or do a movement that doesn't require that much effort or force to do whatever you're doing, your body recruits smaller and less powerful muscle fibers to do that activity. But when you do have to do something that requires a ton of force or requires a ton of effort, your body recruits larger and more powerful muscle fibers. And the dynamic effort method can further help your body's ability to quickly engage those bigger and more powerful muscle fibers, so that way you can be faster in your takedowns, more powerful in your guard passes, and quicker in all of your scrambles. You can almost think of this as like in Lord of the Rings, where you have the orcs and you have the Uruk-hai. If Sauron wanted to send some orcs to go mess up some farm in the Shire, that's like small potatoes. That's easy work for the orcs, because the hobbits, they're not that much of a threat. To be able to take out some hobbits, except for the hobbits in the Fellowship, that's going to be pretty easy, and it doesn't require that much effort. So Sauron's probably just going to send some orcs, which would be those quote-unquote smaller, less powerful muscle fibers. But if Sauron wanted to break down the fortress of Helm's Deep, that requires a ton of effort. That requires a ton of force. So he's going to send his bigger, more powerful army called the Urukai to go to Helm's Deep and take everybody out. Your body kind of acts the same way. If I'm going to pick up a cup of coffee, I don't need to apply that much force or that much effort. So I'm going to only recruit smaller and less powerful muscle fibers. But if I'm going to blast through someone's guard or I'm going to launch into a takedown, that's a high effort, high intensity movement. And in order to be faster and get that movement off quickly, I need to be really efficient in being able to recruit those big, powerful muscle fibers. And the dynamic effort method is a great way to help with that. Number 7, improved inter and intramuscular coordination. Intramuscular coordination refers to the coordination of the muscle within itself. This refers to the muscle's ability to recruit all these different motor units, fire off all those motor units at once, and help improve the synchronicity of those motor units during that contraction. By improving intramuscular coordination, you're improving that individual muscle's ability to contract efficiently and produce high amounts of force. Intermuscular coordination refers to the synchronicity in all the different muscles throughout your body working together to produce a ton of force. You want to make sure that if you're going to be fast, if you're going to be explosive, you want all of the muscles in your body firing off at the right time and firing off at the right speed to be able to propel you forward into that takedown, to propel you forward to blast through that person's guard or scramble to someone's back, whatever the case may be. In addition to that, improving intermuscular coordination, or the coordination between all the different muscles, is an amazing component to helping you decrease your risk of injury, not just on the mat, but also in the gym. Which brings us to our last point. The 8th benefit of using the dynamic effort method is decreasing your risk of injury. The dynamic effort method not only helps improve your ability to produce high amounts of force, but also absorb high amounts of force. Most oftentimes on the mat, injuries happen because there's high amounts of force placed on a tissue that's not prepared for it, and that's when most injuries happen. If you think about whenever you've gotten your shoulder injured in jiu-jitsu, not all the time, but it's very common for shoulders to get injured when there's a big kind of spasmy movement that happens on the shoulder joint, and that's when you feel the pop in your shoulder, or you pull a muscle in your shoulder. If you're just drilling with somebody and they do a nice slow Kimura, as long as you tap in time, you're pretty safe. Your shoulder isn't going to get that banged up. But if someone cranks that Kimura back real hard and applies all of that force really quickly, more force than what your body is prepared for, that's oftentimes where injuries happen. Now, the dynamic effort method is in no way going to prevent injury, but it can significantly decrease your overall risk of injury on the mat. Now I'm going to show you how you can implement dynamic effort method training into your own workouts. There are so many different ways you can mix this into your own training for jiu-jitsu or wrestling on the mat, or even just improving your overall general athleticism. And what's really important is that your dynamic effort method training matches whatever your overall training goals are. And depending on what your training goals are, that may mean that you have to do some different forms of dynamic effort method training to get the desired training stimulus or get your desired result. For example, if your goal was to sprint as fast as you possibly can for 6 seconds, the dynamic effort method workout that you would use to improve your ability to sprint for 6 seconds would look very different than if your goal was to have repeat explosive ability on the mat. You can use the dynamic effort method for both, but the exact exercises, the sets and rep scheme that you use, as well as the rest periods, will look different between those two training goals. Hey, real quick, if you love to lift heavy and roll hard, plus you want to learn how to truly feel and perform your best every single time you step in the gym and on the mat, I'm giving away my brand new training program, Grappler Accelerator, completely for free. This training program has everything you need to help kickstart your grappling athleticism, including a world-class training program that has minimal equipment, workouts designed to help you build strength, stimulate muscle growth, and improve your overall grappling gas tank. It also comes with a simple and clean diet guide that's going to teach you how to fuel your body, not just for the training sessions that you do in the gym and on the mat, but also provide your body with the nutrients required for recovery. And I also threw in a bunch of other dope stuff, including my super sleep toolkit and my complete recovery guide. If you want to download this training program for free, just go to thestrengthmatrix.com/grappler or click the link in the description below. Now back to the video. Regardless of what your training goals are, here are a couple guidelines I like to follow for myself and the athletes that I coach when it comes to using the dynamic effort method. The first being you want to have one dynamic effort method session for the upper body and one dynamic effort method session for the lower body. Or if you're a little bit more of an advanced athlete, you can do one full body dynamic effort method session per week. So for example, you could break that up into you do one day for only upper body dynamic effort work, then a little bit later you do only lower body dynamic effort work, or you could just have that day where it's the full workout is full upper and lower body dynamic effort method training. Now, what's also important to remember is that just like the max effort method, the dynamic effort method can be very taxing on the body. And so most experts suggest that you want to separate your dynamic effort method workouts by about 72 hours. So if you're doing one session for the upper body, one session for the lower body, those should be separated by about 72 hours. And you shouldn't do more than one session for the upper body, and you shouldn't do more than one session for the lower body per week. If you're a little bit more advanced and you do one full body dynamic effort session per week, that's your one session per week for dynamic effort method training. I wouldn't suggest going more than just that one full body session because it can be pretty tough to recover from. Where things tend to get really crazy with the dynamic effort method is exercise selection. And so when I think about dynamic effort method training, I break it down into 3 different categories: lift, body, and throw. The exercises in the lift category are typically compound exercises that you do with a barbell. So squats, bench presses, deadlifts, overhead presses. You can even mix Olympic lifts in there and other variations of those types of exercises. The exercises in the body category are typically exercises that you do with your own body weights. That could be box jumps, broad jumps, other types of bounding and leaping movements. You could put sprints in there, plyometric push-ups, any sort of like body weight, explosive plyometric style, or body weight explosive exercise all fits within that body category. Now, we can add a little bit of external load to some of those things. So for example, instead of just doing a regular body weight sprint, you could add a little bit of resistance with sprinting with a sled or something like that. The exercises in the throw category, I typically think of different types of med ball throws and med ball slams. Now, these 3 categories are just a good place to start. It obviously doesn't cover every single type of exercise you could ever possibly do for dynamic effort method workouts. But if you're new to using this style of training, if you pick exercises from those 3 categories, you're in a good spot. In a typical dynamic effort workout, I'll pick 2 exercises out of those 3 categories. So for example, if we're doing a dynamic effort method upper body workout, I might pick one exercise from the lift category, such as the explosive bench press, and one exercise from the throw category, such as a med ball slam. For a beginner dynamic effort lower body workout, I might pick one exercise from the lift category, such as the kettlebell swing, and another exercise from the body category, such as a broad jump. Remember, one of the biggest benefits of using the dynamic effort method is intermuscular coordination. So compound exercises like squat, bench press, deadlift, overhead press, different types of jumps, kettlebell swings, sprints, all exercises that are all like that. Those are fantastic for improving your body's ability to recruit those different muscles very quickly, apply force very, very explosively and powerfully, and get all of those muscles working together to help your entire body be faster and more explosive on the mat. The more you start to isolate muscle groups, or the more you start to isolate certain movements, it takes away the benefit from the dynamic effort method. So for example, I don't think that doing explosive bicep curls is really going to give you that much benefit compared to an explosive bench press or to an explosive row or to an explosive med ball slam. Exercises that are more compound movement focused tend to have much greater benefit and carryover to helping you be explosive on the mat than explosive isolation exercises. The other thing to keep in mind is that just because an exercise may feel difficult because it's unstable doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be a good exercise for the dynamic effort method. The goal for the dynamic effort method is to be as fast and as explosive and as powerful as you possibly can. So if you're going to do a speed squat and you do it on top of a BOSU ball, things are so unstable, your body isn't going to let you be as explosive as you possibly could because things are so unstable. So just because an exercise may feel more difficult because of some instability, that doesn't mean it's the best exercise to help you become fast and explosive. So just keep that in mind when you're picking exercises for your dynamic effort method workouts. You want to select exercises that are going to help you get closer to your overall training goals while also addressing your individual weak points as an athlete. It's also important to remember that you want to rotate these dynamic effort exercises every so often to prevent accommodation. The law of accommodation is essentially the idea that as you continue to introduce a training stimulus, that stimulus doesn't necessarily always have the same effect that it once did. Your body ends up getting used to that stimulus, and you need to introduce a brand new training stimulus to keep promoting progress and to keep becoming better as an athlete. And that's why it's important to use what most experts call a 3-week pendulum wave. I personally use the 3-week pendulum wave for all my dynamic effort method training. I use it for all the athletes that I work with. And so far, over the last 7 years of coaching grapplers, we've had fantastic results. And so this is how you can implement a 3-week pendulum wave into your own training. At the start of a phase of training, I'll pick my main dynamic effort exercises and I'll run those for 3 weeks. So using the example that we talked about before, for an upper body dynamic effort workout, I might do an explosive bench press from the lift category and a med ball slam from the throw category. For my lower body dynamic effort session, I may do a kettlebell swing from the lift category and a broad jump from the body category. What I'll do is I'll run through those exercises for 3 weeks in a row. Each week, I'm either going to add a rep or 2 reps to each set. I'm either going to add a set to each week or increase each week by 1 or 2 sets, or I'm going to increase the load that I'm using from week to week for a total of 3 weeks. I would suggest if you're just starting out, only pick one type of progression that you're going to use over the course of your 3-week pendulum wave. You can increase in reps, you can increase in total number of sets, or you can increase in load. So, for example, if my upper body workout looks like explosive bench press, say I'm going to start out with 6 sets of 3 reps on explosive bench press, and I'm also going to use an exercise from the throw category, the med ball slam, for 6 sets of 3 reps. In week 1, I'll do 6 sets of 3 for both exercises. In week 2, I'm just going to increase the number of reps that I do per set. I'm going to do 6 sets of 4 reps for the explosive bench press and the med ball slam. And then in week 3, I'm going to take it up one more level and I'm going to do 6 sets of 5 reps for both of those exercises. Once I complete those 3 weeks, I swap out for more new exercises and I start the 3-week pendulum wave over again. So before, for an upper body workout, I did from the lift category, explosive bench press, and from the throw category, a med ball slam. So the new exercises are going to be plyometric push-ups from the body category, and let's say a rotational med ball throw from the throw category. I'll do 6 sets of 3 reps on both of those, but instead maybe this time I choose to change it up by increasing total number of sets per workout from week to week. So in week 1, I do 6 sets of 3 in week 1. Then in week 2, I do 8 sets of 3 in week 2. Then in week 3, I do 10 sets of 3 in week 3. I just completed another 3-week pendulum wave. So now the pendulum swings back to the beginning again. I pick 2 new exercises and I run through the progression again. I found that this has been a huge help and a huge benefit for preventing accommodation, as well as just keeping training fun and always introducing a new stimulus for us to get used to and continue to stimulate positive progress. When I'm designing workouts for some of the grappling athletes that I coach, I often select dynamic effort exercises that are complementary opposites to the exercises that we're using in our max effort workouts. So for example, from the max effort video, you may remember that we still pick big compound lift exercises for the max effort movements. So for example, say on a max effort lower workout, I do Zercher box squats. Now that's a squatting movement pattern. So that same week, for the dynamic effort movements, I might pick a kettlebell swing, which is a hip hinge movement. That way I'm not focusing too much on a one movement pattern throughout the week, and I'm getting a good balance of both squatting movement patterns and hip hinging movement patterns. For the upper body, say our max effort exercise for the upper body is the floor press, which is a horizontal pressing movement. I might use a medicine ball vertical throw for the dynamic effort movement. So that way we're working in the vertical plane and we're working on improving vertical explosive power. When it comes to the sets and reps that you should do in your dynamic effort workout, it all comes down to your ability to maintain maximum speed and explosive power through the set. Some exercises are going to be a lot easier to get all 5 reps at maximum speed, while other exercises may be really tough to maintain that speed for 5 reps. Some workouts, they may be doing some really fast singles. Other workouts, they may be doing a bunch of sets of 5 reps because it's much easier to maintain maximum speed and explosive power for all of those reps. For example, it's a lot easier to maintain speed and explosive power on an exercise like the medicine ball slam versus an exercise like the landmine clean and jerk. Remember, it's so important that you are intentional and pay attention to how fast you're moving on every rep of every set. If you want to get the most out of using the dynamic effort method, every rep of every set should be super fast, super explosive, incredibly aggressive, and violent. For upper body movements, it really should look like, boom, you're throwing a punch on the explosive bench press. Or if you're doing a landmine movement, it should look like you're punching up in the air like you're a one-punch man or something like that. If you're doing lower body movements, you want those lower body movements to look as fast as a jump. If you keep this in mind as you're using the dynamic effort method, it's going to be a great way for you to still be able to get some of those benefits of improving your speed and explosive power that transfers over to your athleticism on the mat. If you notice at any point your reps start to slow down, you either need to take away reps per set or you need to lower the weight that you're using on a given exercise. If you're brand new to using the dynamic effort method, a simple set and rep scheme that I like to start beginners out with is just 6 sets of 3 reps. You can use that in the 3-week pendulum wave that we talked about earlier, starting at 6 sets of 3 reps. And over the course of those 3 weeks, you can just add 1 rep to each set, or you can always stick with 3 reps and just add 1 or 2 sets each week as you're working through that 3-week pendulum wave. Now, the last thing to keep in mind for your dynamic effort workout is rest periods. By keeping short rest periods between sets in your dynamic effort workouts, you can further help increase repeat sprint ability as well as increase your overall work capacity. For myself and the athletes that I coach, I typically prescribe 45 to 60 seconds of rest between sets. And as long as you're not messing around on your phone or goofing off in the gym, you should easily be able to get through all of your dynamic effort work for a given exercise in 10 to 12 minutes. So now let's move on to how you can design your own dynamic effort method workout. I'm going to walk you through how I go through the process of building dynamic effort method workouts. You can copy this format, and then as you get a little bit more comfortable, you can start to implement some of the other things that we talked about in this video. After a full body warm-up and some mobility work, I pick my 2 main dynamic effort movements for the workout. Say we're doing an upper body dynamic effort workout, so the first exercise can come from the lift category. One of my personal favorites is explosive bench press. I'll grab an empty barbell, get set underneath the bar, and I'll do anywhere from 3 to 5 reps, just kind of warming up, but I'm also starting to put a little bit of gas on the movements. As I'm starting to feel a little bit more warm and ready for the workout, even with an empty barbell, I still want to be fast and explosive. From there, I gradually add on a little bit more weight each set, doing sets of 3 to 5 reps and maintaining as much speed and explosive power as I possibly can. Once I get to a weight that I feel like I'm still able to move fast and explosive, like I'm throwing a punch, but I probably can't go any further than that, that's when I start my working sets. I do 6 sets of 3 reps, making sure that every rep of every set is incredibly explosive, super violent and aggressive, and making sure that I'm using compensatory acceleration through the entire set. I only rest about 45 to 60 seconds between sets, and sometimes I just look at the clock and I just start a new set at the top of every minute. You can almost think of this as an EMOM, every minute on the minute, when you start a new set for your dynamic effort work. I run through my 6 sets of 3 reps of explosive bench press, and then I move into my second dynamic effort movement for the day. We just did an exercise from the lift category, so now let's do something from the throw category. I love med ball slams, so I typically do med ball slams after explosive bench press. I do 6 sets of 3 reps on explosive bench press, making sure that every rep of every set is as explosive and violent and aggressive as possible, keeping my rest periods 45 to 60 seconds between sets. And if I do those 6 sets, it does take me a little bit of time to warm up on the bench press. So excluding the time it took me to warm up, which really only takes like 5 minutes, we do about 6 sets of bench press, which all, I guess in total takes like 6, maybe 7 minutes. And then I do my 6 sets of med ball slams, which those definitely only take 6 minutes. So at the very most, 13 minutes, I'm done with my main dynamic effort movements for the day. However, the workout isn't done because I still have my accessory exercises to do as well. Your accessory work uses the repetition effort method, which I'll eventually make a whole video on the repetition effort method in the future. But your accessory exercises for dynamic effort workouts, typically how I structure it is I pick anywhere from 2 to 4 single joint exercises that work on restoration, blood flow, improving general physical preparedness, or just even building up some muscle and working on some individual weak points. And I like to focus on picking exercises that work on some of the smaller muscle groups that were still used in the main dynamic effort movements. For an upper body dynamic effort workout, that may include bicep curls, tricep pushdowns, shrugs, face pulls, maybe even some direct neck training as well. If you've made it this far in the video, you already know that there is so much stuff that goes into using the dynamic effort method to improve your speed and explosive power on the mat. And there are also a ton of mistakes that I see grapplers make when they first start trying to use this style of training. And hopefully by watching this video, you'll be able to avoid making some of these mistakes. Mistake number 1, going past the point of technical failure. Remember, the dynamic effort method is designed to help you become fast and explosive, and you should be as violent and as aggressive and as fast and as explosive as you can be on every rep of every set while still maintaining proper form and technique. No one likes a spaz at jiu-jitsu, and no one likes a spaz in the gym. Just like in jiu-jitsu, if you're spazzing arm bars and spazzing all these techniques, you might be able to get away with that for a little while, but it's really not conducive to helping you be the best technical grappler that you can be in the future. Same thing when using the dynamic effort method in the gym. If you're being a spaz in all of your dynamic effort lifts early on, you might see a little bit of progress, but it's really not going to be great for your overall long-term speed and explosive power development. Mistake number 2, going past the point of intentional failure. We talked about technical failure, which is where you reach the point of your form and technique breaking down. Intentional failure is when you go past the point of being able to match the intention for the workout. If you're doing a dynamic effort method exercise, the intention is to be as fast and as explosive as possible. If you're using a weight that is too heavy or you're doing so many reps that you can no longer be fast and explosive, you've gone past the point of intentional failure. The reason why this is such a huge mistake is because if you truly want to get fast and be explosive on the mat, you have to train fast and train explosive. And so if your dynamic effort method training is not fast and not explosive because you're using loads or weights that are just way too heavy, you're not going to be able to get the most out of this training method. So if you start to notice that your reps slow down, you either need to do less reps or use less weight. Mistake number 3, not selecting the right exercises. I see this mistake happen a little bit more often after someone's been using the dynamic effort method after, say, 6 months to a year. They get really comfortable with the basics of the dynamic effort method, and then they just go off the rails with picking all sorts of crazy exercises. What might have started off as doing an explosive box squat turned into trying to do like speed kettlebell goblet squats on a Bosu ball. Just because an exercise is difficult because it's really unstable or requires a lot of balance doesn't mean that it's actually helping you become faster and more explosive. Remember, the more stability that you take away from a given exercise, the less you're able to be maximally explosive and powerful. At the same time, the more you start to isolate certain muscle groups, the less overall force and explosive power you can put into that given movement. Doing an explosive bicep curl isn't going to have as much of a carryover to you being faster and explosive on the mat compared to a landmine clean or a medicine ball throw. Don't make exercises more unstable just for the sake of making them more unstable, and don't make exercises more complicated just for the sake of making them more complicated. Make sure you understand the intention of the workout and the purpose of how that exercise is going to help you get closer to your training goals. Mistake number 4, not auto-regulating your training. Auto-regulation is a way that you can modify the training volume, so how many sets and reps that you're doing, or the training intensity, which is how close you're getting to failure, based on what you're physically prepared for that day. So for example, your workout may say that you need to do 12 sets of 3 reps on a given dynamic effort exercise. But perhaps the night before, you went to jiu-jitsu and you did all of your hardest sparring rounds and you got smoked by all your training partners. You're going to show up in that workout and you're going to feel real banged up, really, really fatigued. Auto-regulation is just taken into account when you go into that workout. Hey, I had a really hard training session yesterday. I'm still fatigued and I'm still trying to recover from what I did yesterday. Instead of just running my head through this wall in this workout today, just because it says 12 sets of 3, I'm actually going to dial it back a little bit to something that I can do well for today. Mistake number 5, training hard, but not recovering harder. Remember, it's not about what you do in the gym or on the mat that leads to progress. It's about what you do and can recover from that leads to progress. And so even though you may watch this video and you may look at all these different exercises and sets and reps, and you might think like, oh, this is awesome, I'm going to create this workout and all this stuff. That may look great on paper, but it's not going to work out for you if you can't recover from the work that you're doing. Make sure that if you're really trying to be the best athlete that you can, that you're taking care of your recovery by focusing on your sleep, dialing in your nutrition, and properly organizing your overall training schedule. And that covers pretty much everything you need to know about the dynamic effort method. If you have any questions about this method of training or anything else I've covered on my YouTube channel, feel free to drop your questions in the comments below. Lift heavy, roll hard, and I'll catch y'all later. Peace.